All right, Jordan, it's time to talk about Clemson's quote unquote bye week curse. Um, we have not played well the past, let's say, 3 seasons coming out of a bye week. The last time we truly played well coming out of a bye week was 2020, where we played Pitt and kind of destroyed them. But 2021, we played Syracuse. Very, very close game. I was actually at that game in Syracuse. It was a nail biter all the way to the end. Clemson actually wins that game 17-14. 2022 rolls around, got a bye week right before the Notre Dame game, and they just absolutely bodied us for 4 quarters. You remember the line of scrimmage was just, it was very evident that we were mismatched in that game. It was almost embarrassing to watch how both our defense and our offensive line just got pushed around the entire game. We end up losing that game 35-14. And then last year, heading into the Miami game, we had a bye week, go on, lose in overtime to Miami 28-20. Not a great game for us. We've just seemed to stumble and kind of start very slow out of our bye weeks. So with that picture painted over the past 3 seasons, what is your take on the Clemson bye week curse? Do you buy into it? Will Clemson come out aggressive, or will they be flat like they have been the past 3 seasons coming out of the bye week? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. Like, I think the biggest thing, for me, and I guess for the entire fan base watching, you want to see this staff really have these guys prepared. I felt like that preparation was lacking the last 3 years. I mean, 2021, every game was basically a nail biter because you were barely scoring like 25 points a game. But 2022 coming, bye week, and then you have that Notre Dame game. Yeah, it was windy, but you couldn't push the ball down the field, couldn't run the ball. Offensive line got whooped. Special teams was a disaster. Like, there were a lot of phases in the game where it was just kind of a system failure. And in 2023, we know how last year, how the Miami game went. You're up by 10 with in the fourth quarter, and poor clock management, poor play calling. Kind of allowed Miami to get back in that game, and they were starting a true freshman backup quarterback. The defensive line didn't have their best day. They got ran all over. And of course, we know how that game ended with in overtime. Cade Klubnik kind of calling his own number. So it feels like these last 3 seasons coming out of the bye week, this staff has not been able to get the team adequately prepared and focused, coming out. And so, we've talked about how much this coaching staff has upgraded and how much things have changed, since that, 2021 season. The staff looks a lot different on paper. And you feel like you have a lot more experience. And even some of the inexperienced hires you had back then have grown and matured, at least some of them, the ones that didn't get fired. I think that the reality is you need to see this team come out, especially, the first quarter. You want to get out to a good start. This NC State team, I think, is probably, honestly, they're probably the worst team you've played. I don't know. That Syracuse team in 21 wasn't very good, now that I think about it. But still, they don't look like one of the better teams you've played. And, it's kind of different from what we thought they were going to be, heading into the season. So I really think that, with all the momentum you built against from App State, you've had a week to prepare, an extra week to prepare, get healthy, and see if you can build on that momentum. I wouldn't call it a curse, but I do think it's a trend that needs to be broken.
Right. Absolutely. It's certainly at a minimum a pattern at this point, and not a good one, and not one that you want to continue. And this is a game in NC State where they're rolling in, and let's be completely honest, they've beat us 2 out of the 3 seasons, albeit at their stadium, and this is at Death Valley. They haven't beat us in Death Valley since 2002 when Phillip Rivers was their quarterback. Yeah. He's already had an NFL career, had 17 kids, and retired. But they haven't beat us in Death Valley. But again, that doesn't mean they can't. And just because Grayson McCall's hurt and they're starting a freshman quarterback does not mean anything. We lost to Miami starting a freshman backup quarterback last year coming out of the bye week, right? Now, one would assume this offense is much better than that one of last year. At least they looked like it in one game and looked pretty similar in the other game, but I digress. This is certainly a trend that has to be broken. Now, I will say, listening to the player interviews this week, it seems that they are coming with the right energy, the right intensity. They seem to be saying the right things, but again, that's easy to do when you're talking to the media, to say all the right things and toe the company line, if you will, so to speak. It's a different thing when you roll out on that field, and it's a noon game. Sometimes teams start out a little slow in noon games. It might not be the most intense atmosphere that's possible in Death Valley. Not that Death Valley's ever a quiet place to play, but if you had to pick a time to play, noon is the time you want to play, right? You certainly don't want to play a night game in the Valley, so they get a noon game. So Clemson's got to come out and be ready, and they got to come out with the same intensity that they stepped onto that field against App State. Take shots early, stretch the defense, really attack that defense and go after them. Don't come out with these, this conservative play calling where you're just kind of trying to, feel the game out. No, I want to see them go out there and go after that NC State defense early and often.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's going to be a good test for, like I said, a good test for, how much this coaching staff has improved. I think it'll be a good litmus test. We'll dive into the specifics. This is not, the best, at least through 3 weeks, this is not the best looking NC State team that we've seen.
Right.
But they do have some really talented football players. And there is that unknown of starting a true freshman quarterback now. This is going to be, you're going to learn a little bit about the staff and how they've prepared these guys, and also how they make adjustments if things look a little bit different than how they're expecting.
And next topic we're going to cover tonight, Jordan, we're going to talk about the injury updates for the Tigers. We got some somewhat unfortunate news this past week. Another depth piece along that offensive line takes another hit. We got Dietrich Pennington out for the season with a partially torn ACL, but it was a significant enough injury to where they do have to surgically repair it. So they go ahead and wind him down for the season. He's going to have surgery and begin his rehab process. Hopefully be back next season. Again, that's junior or redshirt junior Dietrich Pennington. So another depth piece for that offensive line is out. Outside of that, we didn't get very many injury updates from Dabo Sweeney. He was asked about both Peter Woods and Tyler Brown. And again, he's on with the day-to-day routine this year. That's his only comment for injuries this year, is just day-to-day. So what's your thoughts about the loss of Dietrich Pennington? Any impact that would have along the offensive line? And then what's your feel for Peter Woods, Tyler Brown? I know Dabo says they're day-to-day. Do you have any feel on if both of those guys will play, if they'll try to hold them, will they be limited? What's your kind of feel on the situation?
Yeah, on Dietrich Pennington, I hate it for him. It's just unfortunate. He's a guy that has, at this point been in the program a really long time, has not worked his way as a starter, but they felt like he was ready to be a significant depth piece for them this year. And, injuries suck. And, that's kind of been a trend for him over his career. And so, that's unfortunate for him from his development standpoint. He's one of the older guys in that room now, and, kind of trying to get him, in game shape has been a continuous, battle because he's dealt with so many injuries. And so now you've got to reset the clock a little bit again. They're going to try to get him this year back with a medical red shirt, so that way he'd have 2 years of eligibility.
Yeah.
But again, that's just another setback for him, and it's unfortunate. And Clemson's depth on the interior, that takes a hit. We've talked about how this line does not have a wealth of depth as far as the guys that have played and have been around a long time. I've been pleased with the things that you've been hearing out of some of the younger guys like Elijah Thurman and Mason Wade as true freshmen. But again, this is not a very loaded offensive line room. I mean, you have your starting five, and then you have two guys that really like two guys that you feel good, decent about coming in off the bench, and Trent Howard and Colin Sadler. So you don't really have anything else that has played anybody else that has played significantly. So that's kind of a really precarious situation for this offensive line. So you're going to need these guys to stay healthy. Hate it for Pennington. Hope he makes a speedy recovery, because he's going to have some opportunity next year to really work his way in as a starter. You have with presumably guys like Marcus Tate and Walker Parks, leaving the program. Those guard spots are going to be up for grabs. So
that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Good news on Marcus Tate. He is full go at practice. Dabo did give that earlier in the week. So good to hear that he is not limited whatsoever. And, Dabo said that he could have gone in the App State game should they have needed him. But luckily they were able to hold him. Then we get the bye week, so he should be 100% ready to rock and roll. We'll see about, Tyler Brown, Peter Woods, how much go time they'll get, how much playing time they'll get. But thinking about Peter Woods, and if he's not able to go, I mean, as a Clemson fan, that's got to worry you a little bit, right? Who do you really have behind him? Cade Denhoff, maybe. AJ Hoffler. Those are the first two names that kind of come to mind. You got Jaheim Lawson as well, but again, it does worry me to think that Peter Woods could be limited, especially knowing that NC State's going to try to stretch that, and they're gonna go after that for sure if he's limited at all, and try to break contain and try to get us out on the edge, and cause some damage that way. So I think that is somewhat of a concern heading into this game. Just looking at the injuries, we're not super deep at edge, so hopefully Peter Woods can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tend to think, just kind of reading the tea leaves, I don't have any sort of knowledge of what his status is going to be like for the game, but I've kind of just had the feeling since last week that they're going to hold him. But if he can go, I mean, obviously I'd much rather have him on the field than not. But you do have to wonder, if they bring him out there, is he going to be completely healthy, or is he going to be operating at like 85, 90%? What do we know? And then with Tyler Brown, I think I feel pretty good that he'll play at least some. So, but I don't have any knowledge of that. But obviously his injury was less severe and more of a precautionary thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, it seems like, they kind of made a point to say that he was pulled out of that game as a precautionary type deal. So it seems to me that he could have continued to play in that game, which means after a bye week, he should be ready to rock and roll and get out there and play again. Peter Woods, I think, is a different animal. And to your point, you talk about him being maybe 80, 90%. Does that create a liability on the edge with them trying to get outside and break contain? That's always something to think about. And I'm sure the coaches are thinking about that as well. And that will factor into the decision of, how good does he feel and if he's going to play or not. So again, we won't get any of that information until they run out there with the first guys running out there for the defense on Saturday. So don't expect any information other than day to day at this point.